Welcome back to Africa Speaks. And the United Nations Environmental Assembly 5.2 is currently underway right here in Nairobi. 192 participating nations have taken their seats either virtually or physically. This year's meeting is centered around the post-COVID-19 effects on the environment, including pollution of water bodies by COVID-related materials. Andrea Hinwood is chief scientist at the United Nations Environmental Program. She now joins us virtually. Good afternoon, Andrea, and welcome to Nairobi. How are you loving the weather?
I think it's terrific, and thank you very much for inviting me to talk today.
Now, Andrea, we understand that the UNEA 5.2 is happening in Nairobi, and with that comes the discussion of COVID-19 materials, especially those that were used to fight the disease, which have made their ways into our water bodies. How do these then come to affect the fight in preserving the environment?
So, of course, when we've been dealing with COVID-19, we've been producing a lot of single-use products like masks, like using syringes for our vaccinations and all the rest of it. And most of those are dealt with very well in the hospital system. But often the wastes are unfortunately littered, or they find their way into landfills, etc. So our discussion is actually about how we deal with plastics, and importantly single-use plastics. And we're currently discussing globally how we can actually come up with a globally binding legal agreement to actually phase out plastics.
All right, now your theme this year revolves around strengthening actions for nature to achieve sustainable development goals. So far, how in are we in ensuring that these sustainable development goals that we've put, and especially those that were signed during the Paris Accord, have been achieved? How's our progress thus far?
So unfortunately, we're not doing so well in terms of the sustainable development goals. And by 2030, we've got a range of goals. At the moment, we're certainly not on track to meet them in relation to climate change, in relation to nature and biodiversity, nor in pollution and waste. So what we really are getting together to talk about now is how can we, in the next 8 years, make a huge difference to the global environment, and of course that means in our own local environments. So we really need to start restoring ecosystems. We need to have a globally binding agreement on plastics, and we need to stop producing greenhouse gases so that we can have an impact on increasing temperatures and the frequency and intensity of all sorts of climate events.
Now, 400 million tons of plastic are produced yearly across the globe. Only 10% of these gets to be recycled. Then what is the conversation that UNEP is having in ensuring that plastic is easily recycled when it comes to fighting and preventing preserving the environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you know, we're not pretending that this is really easy, but we really need to reduce single-use plastics for start. And Kenya has made and has actually been a great leader in this regard in terms of the approach to banning single-use plastics in 2017, and of course all plastics in conservation areas in 2020, and it's fantastic to actually see that leadership. So we actually need companies who are producing these plastics to also look at recycling those plastics, ways of actually putting them into other products, reducing them in the first place, of course, which, as I say, Kenya has done quite well. We need to stop having them ending up in our landfills, or actually where we see them in our waterways, which then end up with the 11 million tonnes per year in the marine environment.
By the year 2040, we expect that the amount of plastics that get into our waterways will triple. Just paint the picture of how crazy and dangerous this is to the marine life.
Yeah, well, of course, plastics, and I think many of your viewers and listeners would know that when particular plastic, they get in the environment, and marine species such as turtles and fish, the other issue that perhaps people are less aware of is that when plastics get in the marine environment, they break down and they become smaller fragments in, and unfortunately, they end up transporting other pollutants, but they also get taken up by marine species. So we have about 800 marine and coastal species that are potentially affected by plastic. So this is why UNEP is advocating strongly for a globally binding and the support we get, because it's a significant environmental and human health issue.
All right, now, when we talk about conserving the environment and helping in protecting it, then it comes to our own individualistic approach in fighting it, and also our communities around. How do we then go back to our communities and enlighten them when it comes to preserving the environment and the importance of disposing plastics in the right way?
Yeah, so we need to get information into communities, and this is some of the work that we're trying to do, where there are alternatives. So going and having a plastic bottle with water in it, take a bottle that you can reuse over and over and over again. And the good thing again about Kenya is that you don't want to buy things that have packaging in them. And if you have particular packaging, then what we need is the recycling so that we can turn them into other products. Some of these are fantastic in turning them into clothing, which lasts for a long time, or into other products that can last for a long time as well. In infrastructure, there are even examples of where some of the material is being used as an So I think the key here is for people to actually think about it in the first place, and then look at the very simple options of what sorts of things they can do to make a difference. And we all have a role, every single one of us, from anyone at home right through to governments.
Now, when we talk about environmental conservation and manufacturing of plastics, there are two things involved. There is the need to preserve the environment. There are business people who are fighting these policies. Now, how do we then have this conversation with manufacturers, business people, so that they are also inculcated into this fight of preserving the environment?
I think they need to, I think consumer pressure is really important for businesses, and to understand how important this is. And of course, if we end up with an agreement on plastics, that will also help industries to transition. But I think the other thing, and I would say this to businesses out there, this is a great opportunity for you to be innovative and to actually come up with solutions to using plastic, because I think that the community understands the impact. We all go to the beach, we see the plastics on the beach, and I would suggest that very few of us actually think that's a good thing. And so I would encourage businesses to be innovative, because actually look at all the products that we have got. We've been innovative. We've produced phenomenal technologies, our mobile phones, our new cars, our electronics, etc. Well, our private sector and our innovators have done that. So let's innovate for environmentally sustainable products and actually get a market advantage. So that would be my call to all you businesses out there. This is an opportunity.
Now, who are attending this meeting, and are they all in Nairobi?
So they're not all in Nairobi yet, but there are a lot in Nairobi. So of course we have the United Nations Environment Assembly, who meet every 2 years, and that's what the meeting is on the 28th of February to the 2nd of March. And they set the global priorities for the environment. They also develop the environmental law. But we also have a lot of different stakeholders, like the sector, community groups, particular organisations that have an interest in the environment. And they are all going to be here in Nairobi to engage in the discussion, both in terms of the decision-making bit, but also in terms of providing support for the environmental issues that we're dealing with, and to talk about solutions. So it's a very exciting week, and I encourage again everyone to have a look at UNEP's this week, because of course what follows is the celebration of UNEP in its 50th.
And finally, Andrea, I have two final questions for you. What are the opportunities for the youth when it comes to clearing the oceans? And also, we understand that you'll be celebrating 50 years of UNEP in the country. What does that mean when it comes to the fight in conserving the environment? Andrea?
Yeah. We encourage engagement in all environmental issues and to make a difference. And in our 50th year, of course, you know, the youth are things that we do now. So we are actively engaging young people and having a voice at the table in terms of the decisions that we make. And in terms of UNEP in 50, it's an opportunity for us to reflect what we've done well, but what more we have to do. And clearly we have a lot to do because of the environmental degradation. We also have a ahead of us. And I think this is our opportunity to look at the next 50 years and what sort of legacy we leave. And that's actually exciting.
Andrea Hinwood is Chief Scientist at the United Nations Environmental Programme. We wish you the very best in your deliberations and looking forward to what will come from that meeting. Now, moving on.